All right, hello everybody, good afternoon. We are gonna wait just a minute here just to give everybody time to log in. All right, so it looks like we're gonna have almost a full house today, so that's good. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for attending our webinar today, Rethink Pin Marking with Michael Davis. And I'm Christina. I'm on the marketing team here at MECCO. And I'll be moderating today. Just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, if you have any questions during the presentation, we're saving some time at the very end to try to get to all of those. So if you have any questions, just go right over to the control panel that you should see in the side of your screen, pop those in there, and so we'll try to get to all of those today. If there's anything else that you would like to talk through with Michael, if there's any specific questions that you have or challenges that you might be having right now with your marking, we will be posting a link to book a discussion or a demo with Michael. You can book with him directly, and I'll be posting that on MECCO's LinkedIn page right after this session. So you can just go on over there and pick a date and a time, and you can meet with Michael yourself. And you could always head over to MECCO.com to check out any of the technologies that you learn about today. So without further ado, we can get started. I'm going to formally introduce you to Michael Davis. He is a very experienced sales engineer with MECCO. So Michael, you want to start off by just telling us a little bit about your background and why you feel this topic is so important today?
Sure, thanks, Christina. Yeah, so like Christina said, my name is Michael Davis. A little bit about me. I grew up in the Midwest, like right outside St. Louis, and I now reside in College Station, Texas. I've worked in the manufacturing industry in different aspects for about 6 years now. Started as a manufacturing engineer, moved to a field engineer, and now obviously I work as a sales engineer. I worked when I was working in the manufacturing industry, it really opened my eyes to like how different levels of a company perceive their operations. When I first started out, I had a line that was like really inefficient, and so the company assumed this was kind of just a standard operating procedure. It was what it was. But being on the floor, I was able to find, frankly, a really simple solution that was able to triple our efficiency number. The reason I turned to this side of manufacturing was I found that while many in the industry want to have the best and most efficient equipment, many weren't using what they had in-house to their full capabilities. Today we'll talk about a lot more of that. Talk about how pin marking and small changes can yield large results. So, as Christina mentioned, while we're going through this, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put those in the questions or the chat box, and we'll make sure to get to them before the end of the presentation today. So let's go ahead and get into it. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to look at why companies mark their parts. And if you're watching this, I'm going to assume you're all either marking parts or at least looking into marking parts. So we'll discuss, the major driving factor for that. And then we'll talk about, what the existing technologies are and how they can give manufacturers a competitive advantage. When we talk about the competitive advantage, it only happens if we're using the machines that we have to their highest capabilities. Once we talk about that, we'll talk about how those machines can be upgraded and why we would do that, and where that takes us. So first things first, why are we marking parts? And I think that's kind of obvious. Most of the time when we mark parts, we're doing it because our customers are asking for it and we want to meet their demands. If they're asking for like certain markings like logos or anything like that, we want to make sure they get what they're required. But because we're marking parts, What if we took that and flipped the switch and said, you know what, the customer obviously wants it, but how can we make that mark work for us? Marking products is usually driven by customer requests. Like I said, things like product ID, branding, anything else that customers require, heat numbers, things like that. And while that's an important aspect, many manufacturers don't utilize the marks they're already making to benefit their own company. Part marking, specifically impact marking, which is what we're talking about today, can help solve many business challenges like mistakes in the manufacturing process, defective parts, lack of inventory control, late deliveries, and even legal liabilities. So what are we using to mark parts? If you're watching this now, like I said, you're probably doing some sort of impact marking, and there's a variety of options. Hand stamps, you can see on the left-hand side, that's where most companies start. Then you have like roll stamping, and then obviously what we're talking about is dot peen markers. 10 years ago, when we looked at manufacturing, most people were using some sort of manual operation like the roll stamping and the hand stamping. But these technologies are slowly fading away because people are really understanding the value of high quality, fast marks. If you're doing direct impact marking, you should be using some sort of dot peen mark, but if you aren't yet, you're not alone. If you're not investing in the right equipment, chances are you're not gaining that competitive advantage. So almost half of US manufacturers, according to a Deloitte study, have not caught up with today's technological opportunities. I do a lot of work in the oil and gas industry, and one story that comes to mind is we had a customer in the oil and gas industry that was an industry leader, and when I met with them, they were still using hand stamps. They were putting a lot of information on their products, heat codes, part number, date of manufacture, things like that. And because they were hand stamping all that, they were only able to produce about 10 products a day. Simply by adding the dot peen technology, they were able to move forward and get to the point where the marking of the parts was no longer the bottleneck, and it helped them really understand where their facility was. Obviously, just getting the mark is the beginning, and I wouldn't say that they're operating at the level of, let's say, like the automotive industry, which is typically in the forefront of stuff like this. But looking at the story, we can see who stands to benefit from adopting this technology. And that's you guys. Right now, modern dot peen technology is still a valuable competitive advantage. Just having the system may give you some basic benefits, analysis like throughput and line efficiency numbers. But without some of the other data that you can gather with the most up-to-date systems, you're not truly able to understand the whole picture. Like I said, 49% of US manufacturers are using older or even manual devices, and often this technology is antiquated and not really helping them solve things like root cause in real time. Most of the systems that they have aren't even able to capture data at all, and most times the identification or the traceability processes they're implementing result from customer demands rather than what it could be, which is meaningful, valuable data that helps drive the company. So, what can today's technology do? And like I said, we'll go through all of this today, but it can be a competitive advantage. It takes investing in that right technology to really get the full impact, but what is that right solution? And the truth is, everybody has their own individual needs and goals. So when we work with industry leaders, they're looking beyond just serialization. They're looking to understand constraints. They're looking to understand what's going on in their process, where it's happening, and why. So we talked about, that's where we're at, but how do we get there? And the end goal, I think, for every manufacturer is, no recalls, no errors, no rework. But talk is one thing, like how are we actually going to implement it? And it starts by total part marking, meaning every part being produced is tied into a database to reference where that part is and how and where it's going. And then we look at what information is needed. Is it going to be an automated inline solution or something that an operator has to take the marker to? In an ideal world, the inline solution is great and everything is automated, but we all know that that's not really the most efficient way, and it's not always going to be the most feasible solution. So we understand what constraints we're working under and help determine what that end goal for each individual company will look like. We know getting the parts marked is a priority, typically by customer demands, but understanding what the application requirements are, things like cycle time, marking area, things like that will help us understand what equipment we need. Then we'll look into, any additional technologies. A lot of times we're talking about barcode scanners or vision systems or quality checks points. We ask questions like, is the goal to quality qualify each part? Are we looking to verify the code or scan the code into a database? And and once those are solved, we'll look into the database. We need to understand things like, are the parts being scanned by an operator, or is the operator just keying that information into a database? Are we talking directly to the database, and what is that about? Are all the parts the exact same, or are we running very dynamic parts where we'll have to adjust location, what parts are being marked, what information is being marked on the fly? But adding all of that together will get us to that end goal we're talking about. So the end goal will be unique to you, but to gain the best competitive advantage, we really are looking for that cradle to the grave traceability. This means as soon as the part is brought into the facility, we're marking it as a raw material. That starts the process. So when you mark it at the very beginning, this allows you to limit, mistakes like misplacing the part, incorrectly modifying it. Things where you have a part and you put it on the wrong line because that raw material, you weren't sure where you were going with it. And then just losing the part in general. So by scanning before and after a part is brought into the process, we'll be able to see the movement of the part as it goes through. So adding to that, you can also bring in fail safes. Things like not allowing operators to do processes out of order. So obviously you don't want to ablate ablate after you paint. You want to paint it, in that order. So you want to make sure that we're in and out in the right order. The other thing that we're wanting to look at is quality checks and making sure that, like, if something is out of order, is it intentionally out of order because it's a one-off product, or is it something that there's an issue? And so requiring supervisor approval of things miss locations. Those are the kind of things that we can implement by integrating into a database. And that database will help your team, gather data and truly understand what's going on while it's being produced. Things like figuring out where the true bottleneck is, figuring out what machines are problematic. Why are we having a lot of rework on this location? So that all that gets into wasted operation time, which is money. So the last couple slides we've talked about what goes into gaining that competitive advantage. But now I'm going to show you some of the features of what we would consider the top of the market, which is our machines, and how those machines are able to get you to that end goal. So obviously, to start, speed and depth are the #1 concern for anybody who's doing marking. You want to make sure that the part is getting marked, but that you can read it and that it's not taking all day to mark it. With our systems, you'll get the fastest, deepest mark in the industry. So when you're talking about depth, everyone can say, hey, this is the deepest mark in the industry, this is that. So I think seeing is believing. So I've got a video here I wanted to kind of run through quickly just to show you what we're talking about when we say the deepest. And you might want to turn your computers down a little bit. I don't know how loud this will show up when we run it. So, as you can see there, that's a really deep quality mark, something that we really take pride in. So that's the first point of what your technology needs to have, is that speed. The next thing is the quality, and you can see a lot of older technologies use what dot peen was, which is that traditional dot peen mark that you can see right here. And that mark, that's okay for a lot of companies, but when it comes to quality, the Vibrapene or the scribe style mark is just way better. And these old style marks, one thing that we've seen is that they can be illegible, and based on that illegibility, it lead to shipping issues and quality issues. And then if you're looking at cosmetic marking, the scribe mark is by far the best when it comes to this. It really gives you a crisp mark to go off of. So, speaking of the scribe, the next step in our process is understanding your facility constraints. Many of the facilities that we work with are super noisy. They don't have any requirements, but we have seen in the industry where they have a fairly quiet operation and they need something that's going to be safe for hearing and not require any additional PPE. That's where we would really push for you to understand the scribe and its capabilities. The scribe, when used, it allows for quality marks at decibels 30% lower than industry standards require. And so, like I said, it helps with preventing the need to use additional PPE. And so I've got a video again here that'll show you, what that sounds like. So as you saw there, I mean, that is a crisp mark. That's a great machine to use if quality is the most important thing, or if you have issues with noise control. Once we figure out, what technology we're going to use, we're going to start looking into the competitive advantages here. And the first way to look at this is by adding a 2D or QR code to your system. These codes allow the company to input and collect much more data without having a large footprint. I mentioned earlier the oil and gas industry example where, they're putting 6-7 lines of human readable code onto the part. And while that may be a requirement, adding a simple QR code like you see here allows you to have much more data in a much smaller footprint. This one here is just an example, but if you put this on a piece of metal or whatever component you're marking, it would have this URL below it. Obviously, that's like kind of a basic example, but if you use that, you can link that URL to a database. This is where we start to get into that scan in, scan out idea. And that's where we're going to start talking about like the cradle to the grave traceability. It shows things like where the part's been, what it's been through, quality standards that the part needs to adhere to, and missing shipping standards if the process fails a quality check. An example we had was we were working with a company that implemented the machine, and they at the time they were just doing part numbers, and the customer they had was asking, they were doing large quantities, 5,000 or so per batch, and they had 4 batches that were going out, and they weren't tracing what batch was being shipped out. It was, mark the part, send the part. And when we talked to them, by adding that QR code, they were able to scan that in and be able to reference what parts have actually been shipped out in which batch. Or are all the parts from the same batch being shipped out, or are they all from different batches? So being able to do that allowed them to tell their customers, what was being shipped, which is just as important as shipping it itself. And then, the last really important piece here is the connectivity. We talked about it in the previous slide, but our machines are able to tie into any ERP or manufacturing process software using Ethermark. That technology will allow you to use PLC to not only query data, but you can also adjust locations and other parameters, what to mark, all through your database rather than having someone manually changing that. The ability to tie in prevents things like accidental keystrokes, extra spacing, mistyping information, or just completely forgetting information because it's being pulled from that database. It prevents operator error. Additionally, that system can also output when a mark has been complete, and it tells the software what part of the process it's currently at, where it's going, and as it scans in, scans out, you can see the whole picture. If a part went from being scanned to paint and you missed 4 processes in the middle, it's going to tell you that data. So you'll know, hey, let's see what's going on and why that happened. We want to make sure that our processes are not only complete, but they're robust. So by adding that, you have that improved security of, okay, I know this is working. And by adding the database, you're preventing things like, we had this one example where it was an automated system, but they had an operator overlooking it, and they started having errors and they weren't entirely sure what was happening. Well, what happened was the operator was getting into the machine and manually changing things, even though they weren't supposed to. So with the new machine, and you can see down here, we have the ability to disconnect the keypad. What that does is it allows you to just have a box where no one can mess with it unless you have that keypad. Just adds that level of preventing anyone from doing something that they're frankly not supposed to be doing. And one other thing that ties in with this connectivity is the gray market. And if you're not familiar with the gray market, that's where someone will take your product, manipulate it, and then sell it in a way that it wasn't intended to be used. This is becoming a major problem in the industry. And one reason that we've really implemented this data connectivity is if you have everything referenced, that the part number, all these things, if someone comes back to you on warranty and says, hey, this thing didn't work, you can look at it and say, well, it's labeled wrong, so where did you buy it? You can really root cause what's going on with your warranty claims. We've seen tons of companies that come to us talking about these sort of things, and what ended up happening is they're basically taking the cost because scammers are manipulating their product, selling it, and then because it's their product, they're required to be in charge of it. So by adding that database, you can figure out what's going on there, prevent basically scammers profiting off of your demise. So I know I put a lot of information out there. There's a lot of things that you can do with this technology, and I can definitely answer any questions as you guys have it. But no matter where you're at right now, the first thing you need to do is understand what the right solution for your company is. And that can be labeled in short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. We want to help you succeed, and you know your company the best. And we think with you knowing your company and us knowing the technology, we can work together to help truly understand what your needs are. And based on that, talk as a team about how to get you that competitive advantage we've been talking about. Typically we start with some basic questions: material, application, what kind of integration you're looking to do, near term and long term. And that'll really get us to the bottom of what the issues you're seeing are. And once we define that, we can really understand what the solution will look like and how we can get to that point. So, like I said, we went over a lot of information today. I wanted to hit on high level points of this because there's so much there that everybody's going to be kind of looking in their own aspects. But if I can give you 3 takeaways, it's high quality marks alone can be a competitive advantage, but really getting that top tier competitive advantage is when we innovate solutions that implement strategic help. And those things can improve efficiencies, can provide significant cost savings. If we're thinking about marking, the main goal is to think, hey, it's not a requirement from our customer, It's a way for us to solve company issues. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining. Like I said, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out. Like Christina mentioned at the beginning, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I can always talk to you about one-on-one, even if it's just a question of, hey, we've done this, what do you think? Or just a high-level question for future reference. You can always reach out to me about that. So Christina, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do have a few in here, and all right, we had a question about sample part marking. You could take that one.
Yeah. So going back to our process, and that's where the sample marking is going to be huge. So what we do as a company is, you send in the part. This is always going to be free for us. You send in the part to us. We're going to look at the part, determine what technology you'd like to use. We have, obviously we have lasers. We didn't really talk about this today, but we also have the dot peen. And we'll mark those based on your requirements. And we'll give back useful data like cycle time, what was used. If you're doing QR codes or 2D data matrices, verifying that they scan, giving you the quality check on that. We always grade our scans, and we want to make sure that they're A or B rated. If you guys are familiar with the automotive industry a lot, they really adhere to that, and they have their own regulations. So we want to make sure that not only are we marking it, but that it's a good quality mark. So at any time you can request to send in samples. We'll have you fill out a sheet, you send it in to us, and we'll go through all of that and then follow up with any additional questions we may have for you, because sometimes there's a little bit more difficult parts, or we want to talk with you about, hey, how does this look? Did it come out the way that you expected it? Is there anything else you want us to do? So we can really understand, what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy process, actually. So Michael, another question here: are there any special settings to remove the pendant, or can you just remove it?
Oh, good question. No, so you can just remove it at any point. The one thing you'll have to do is you'll have to save the file that you're working in. If you're working through PLC, it's a little different, but if you're working setting it up manually and then going through PLC, you'll just want to make sure that file is saved and loaded so that you can reference it. But yeah, we have some customers that don't even use the PLC yet, but they take the pendant away and they give their operators a green and red button. Basically just says mark when you're ready or stop it if something happens, but that's the extent of what they're able to do.
All right. So another question, Michael, are we able to come on site to demonstrate any markers?
Yeah, so obviously, with COVID, I know there's lots of companies, and I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing about COVID, but certain companies are allowing us on site, certain aren't. So we'll work with you if you are interested in having us come on site to really show the product. We have people all over the country that are ready to do that. Just reach out to us and we can always set that up.
Yeah, I think that leads right into the next question of, in this time of COVID, do you offer virtual demos?
Yeah, so really the one, I hate to say this, but the one advantage that COVID has given us is that more companies are in a digital landscape. So you have things like, go to Zoom, Microsoft Teams, where we can do meetings with a group of people and do a virtual demo. And it's still a one-on-one experience, or company to company experience, where you can still ask questions. It can be a conversation. We can show you the mark. We can show you how the software works. Any questions that you'll have along the way, and you'll really be able to understand it. So it doesn't take us being on site to do something like that.
Yeah, true. So another question, is there any sort of machine that could be used for personalization and also logo applications on an assortment of items?
Yeah, so going back, like I said, we have lasers and we have dot peen. Anything that we offer has the ability to personalize with logos, obviously barcoding, things like that. But really where the logos come in anytime you have a logo, we can always mark that. We have a software, so we can help you with the logo, or you can reach out to us and we'll give you the software. It's free as long as you have the system. And what that does is you can overlay your logo to make a vector file for it, which gets uploaded to the controller. So any sort of logos, personalizations, anything you can really think of, you can do it.
All right, great. I think we have time for one more here. So, if somebody's marking serial numbers because their customer requires it, how would you recommend going from this to getting more internal benefits as well? It's a good question.
Yeah, good question, good question. So really, like I said, it's going to roll out in multiple phases. And I can tell you typically what happens. So the first thing that we always, you're going to sell the machine, or you're going to really buy into that machine. But one thing that we commonly see is the next issue is either keystroking errors or missing data, things like that. So the first step, I think that's a very simple step, would be adding the barcode scanners. And that's multifaceted. So you can attach a barcode scanner to our machine and scan a traveler so that the operator is never actually putting anything on there. It's automatically uploaded. And it prevents, like I said, things like the wrong numbers, what I call fat fingering the keypad, where you hit multiple at once, things like that. So I would think that would be the first step. From there, we would look to go to things like the vision software to verify if we're putting scans on, and then the database. And the database is one where we'll look at it, and a lot of times what we do is we work with your IT department to help build that and facilitate it. Obviously, there's security concerns, like your company's not going to let us just jump into your ERP system. But what we can do is work with your IT department to talk back and forth and see what information needs to be had. And that's going to give you, the most long-term benefits is by implementing those things, the barcode scanning and adding in each process barcode scanning. Once the database is created, then you can go in location to location, scan in, scan out processes. That gives you the ultimate benefit of really understanding everything.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation, and that's so important right now, is looking long term and not just what you should be doing, but how you can actually get there. And there is actually a roadmap to get there.
Yep,
so that's
100%. And like I said, everybody is different. So if there's any specific questions, hey, here's what we have, how would you do this, things like that, we can definitely talk through that. So feel free to reach out. My email was at the beginning, but like Christina said, we're going to be sending out something on LinkedIn to help reference that. And it'll have my calendar on there, so you can schedule with me to really discuss all of these things.
Yeah, that's posted right now, so you could pop on over to LinkedIn and book a demo with Michael right now if you need to. I don't see any more questions coming up right now, so Michael, I think we can wrap it up.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody coming on, and like I said, any questions, feel free to reach out. We're always here to help. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.